Today, we're fortunate to have a team from the Madison area Crime Stoppers with us today to talk about community policing in action. Our team members are Wendy Reichel, Kim Richmond, and Bonnie Rowe, who've all been very active in safety communications. They have a website, Safety Connection, and are really the interface between the public and law enforcement here in Dane County, especially Madison area. Wendy, I'd like you to take it over, please.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for having us. So community policing isn't just about working with police when you want to solve problems or address crimes in your neighborhood. It can be a fun and beneficial partnership among neighbors and police officers where you play a part in building a support system. The benefit is that you'll feel much more connected to your community. The three of us are very excited to share some of our experiences with you and give you some ideas that we hope will inspire you to get more involved. I inadvertently got interested in community policing about 8 years ago now, when my neighborhood went through a very stressful wave of crimes. We had 36 forced entry home break-ins, including 8 on my immediate block alone. The thieves were using crowbars to break in, and they didn't even care if people were home watching TV or sleeping at the time. Neighbors were very upset and angry and on edge for quite a few months. Some of the victims even moved out of our neighborhood because they no longer felt safe. My husband and I volunteered to be part of a neighborhood watch back then, and we met with police officers and neighbors to try and find solutions. And that's when I discovered how much our police department really cares about its residents. The neighborhood beat cop and even our police chief vowed that they would turn things around for us, and they did. Our police neighborhood partnership continued even after the thieves were caught, and it eventually became the inspiration for a new community building program that I helped a Madison police officer launch called the Good Neighbor Project. It's now being adopted by other cities. The Davenport, Iowa Police Department came here to learn about it, and they launched their program just before the pandemic. They now have almost 100 neighborhoods and community groups participating. Kim is going to tell you a little bit about the Good Neighbor Project in just a few minutes, and then I will share a list of fun ideas that you can participate in or organize that will help you bring together your police officers and the neighbors in your community. But first, Bonnie is going to start us off by sharing how she got involved in community policing and how you can benefit from becoming a more engaged resident when it comes to safety. Take it away, Bonnie.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with you all today and share a really fun journey that I've been on the past 2+ years, along with my good friends, Wendy and Kim. Actually, this journey didn't start out fun because what kicked it off was the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. If there's the ability to share a slide, I do have a slide for that. That occurred very near where my grandparents lived and where I spent a lot of time as a kid. It felt close to home, and I really struggled with it. I also struggled watching footage of what happened in downtown Madison those following nights, as many police officers stood motionless as rocks, bricks, and frozen water bottles were pelted at them from the crowd they were there to protect and serve, and a squad car burned in the street. The question that hung over me in that moment was, could something like that happen here with our Madison Police Department? I'd lived in Madison for 21 years at that time and really knew nothing about our police department. So I went to work learning everything I could about what makes the Madison Police Department tick. And then I started to get to know the officers and command staff at community meetings. There should be a new slide. I started attending Coffee with a Cop and asked questions, listened, and made new friends. I met police officers and command staff who explained why they do things the way they do. Like how having more officers on a dangerous scene actually gives them more time and options and decreases the likelihood of needing to use force. And the answers to a million other questions that I and others had. And I keep going back week after week because of the relationship built with community members and police officers and the partnership it provides. This is where trust in my police department began. And then I went on a few ride-alongs and continued to learn and grow in trust. Wendy will share more about ride-alongs later, but I highly recommend them if you're at all interested, because nothing is more real and active than going on a ride-along. You see firsthand the variety of calls officers handle during their shift. Then last November, I attended the Community Academy, which should have another slide. Some departments call them the Citizens Academy. This was a nice mix of classroom learning from actual police officers, like how the special events team handles crowd control, or about MPD's mental health unit and how they embed mental health workers right along with the officers. Then we had the virtual reality session, where I had to try to talk a virtual suicidal person out of jumping out a window. And it was both more real and more difficult than I ever would have thought. By the end, I said, I don't know what else to say. I'm not a police officer. And that got some giggles. We met some mounted patrol units, the canine unit pictured here, as well as the motorcycle unit, and got to see demonstrations like watching an officer lay down his bike. Also pictured here are academies in other cities like Oshkosh, Fitchburg, and Middleton. The top center photo is Kim and Wendy's Community Academy class. And then Kim came back and attended one with me last November. Early on, I also learned a lot about budget issues. New slide. Like several other cities in 2020, the Madison Common Council has tried to defund the police department to fund other front-end issues, which are also important, but not at the expense of an already underfunded police department in a rapidly growing city. I learned to pay attention to city issues and how I, as a resident, can speak into these issues. And then I learned how to invite others to come along and do the same, write letters to the mayor and alders, and show up to give comments at city meetings and budget meetings and all that. That fall, the city banned facial recognition technology for all departments, but ended up that the police department could retain the ability to use it to locate and rescue child victims of sex trafficking. That exception may have been put in place due to public pressure. Many alders wanted an outright ban. Then new slide. Through this advocacy, I even had Chris Rickert, a veteran reporter at the Wisconsin State Journal, interview me in my kitchen as a police advocate for a feature in Know Your Madisonian. It wasn't popular back in the summer of 2020 to show public support for police. But community members, you heard Sheriff Barrett, these officers need our partnership. They need us residents to inform the community about what affects them, how city politics work, and how we can come alongside to support these guardians of our community. We need to support them politically where they cannot necessarily engage. That trust and partnership continued to grow, and so did my heart to build a bridge between our police department and our community. Wendy, Kim, and I, among others, dream of ways we can come alongside our local police and help others get to know and trust them. That is where the magic happens. Police community partnership is key in the 21st century, and we want to help build that bridge, which is one reason we all three joined the Board of Crime Stoppers. There's a slide on that. Community members, all of us have an important role to play in public safety in our cities and towns. We are the eyes and ears on the ground. Crime Stoppers is a national organization active in cities and towns all over the country. Its goal is to increase safety and solve crimes by offering cash rewards for anonymous tips, among other things. We post a crime of the week and other bulletins on our Facebook and media pages and encourage people to report suspicious activity. We also concern ourselves with crime prevention by hosting home safety nights and national nights out. During our monthly meetings, we vote on rewards for tips. It truly is a partnership between local law enforcement and the community. Next slide. I also use the Nextdoor Neighborhood app and Facebook to bridge the gap between police and the community. Not everyone reads the police department's webpage like we do. And when there's important information shared about the neighborhood or crime trends or specific police priorities, it's a great place to share them with a wider audience. I also enjoy correcting faulty narratives when they occur or explaining how budget cuts to our police department affect all of our public safety. For example, recently, all kinds of folks are complaining about speeding and reckless driving on our streets, and they want to know, where are the cops? Why aren't they out writing more tickets? Well, due to budget cuts, we only have 5 police officers dedicated to traffic enforcement and safety in a city of 270,000 people and growing. And they only work a weekday shift between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. Of course, any sworn officer can write a traffic ticket, but as short-staffed as they currently are, they have little to no time for traffic enforcement or any proactive policing. They are running from 911 call to 911 call. Or, new slide, when a group of people or someone had recently started stringing a cord across a heavily trafficked bike path at neck level, which knocked some people off their bikes, and residents were asking why police weren't putting up cameras to catch the culprit. I knew and could explain that the Common Council had passed a surveillance ordinance back at the height of 2020 police reforms that made simply putting a camera up in a new place a process that would take months. I enjoy educating the public about what I'm learning and how city decisions affect our safety. And I think it's important. You could do that too in your community. It starts by building relationships and trust in your police department and learning how the political process in your city or town works. Community connections are so important. New slide. In August of 2021, I initiated a meeting of concerned residents, representatives from our police department, many city leaders, and the media to a community safety conversation at a local park. We had a decent turnout despite a spike in COVID, and many residents presented their concerns to each other, as well as to alders, a deputy mayor, command staff from the police department, and other city leaders. Next slide. And it ended up in the evening news. The important thing is we need all voices at the table to address our significant safety and neighborhood concerns. COVID has done a wonder at keeping us apart. It's time to come together and fight for safer communities with one voice. We have similar neighborhood meetings and try to broaden the reach of the police department, like you can see in this new slide, Donuts and Dialogue about a year ago. The magic is in police officers interacting with the public they serve. So there is increased legitimacy, trust, and partnership. It takes all of us together, doing our own parts to have the safe communities we all want. And lastly, I need to comment on the joy of volunteering. I don't have time to hit on them all, but it has been a genuine blast to serve our MPD officers and also to serve alongside with them as we serve the community, like we have in so many ways. Next slide. Back in 2018, then Lieutenant, now Captain Mike Hansen asked the community to support something more lasting than simply buying toys for children for the holidays. He was proposing a new one-on-one initiative called Community Read. Neighborhood officers would help identify some struggling youth who might benefit from such a program. They found former teachers who were willing to tutor these kids. And at this event pictured here, Kim and I were volunteering at their celebration, honoring these kids for all their hard work. It was an honor to see the smiles on the faces of these kids and their family members and tutors as the students received their rewards. And around Thanksgiving time, next slide, the Madison Police Department and especially their Black Officers Coalition partnered together with a local grocery store to provide healthy holiday meals for families in need. Last year, we provided meals for 211 families. We enjoy the opportunity to bag these groceries shoulder to shoulder with officers who then load them into their squads and deliver them to families in need in the neighborhoods where they work. It is so much fun, and especially fun to see the joy of the officers. They definitely serve the community in a wide variety of ways. And now I'll turn it over to Kim, who will tell us about the Good Neighbor Project.
Morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share our experiences with you today. As the sheriff mentioned, it's indeed an honor to be here today. I'm going to share with you some of the most important ideas and experiences that I've learned over the recent years while participating in community policing and neighborhood safety. After retiring from full-time in 2017, I looked for something to do to pay back my local community. I whittled it down to a few things that would fit into my part-time crossing guard schedule in nearby Monona. I've always supported the Madison Police Department, so I attended a few lunches with an officer and coffee with a cop. There were no other neighborhood meetings regarding safety or community policing on my side of town. You'll hear us you'll hear us talk a lot about community policing. It's all about developing community partnerships and engaging in problem solving together. Vehicle thefts from vehicles, home burglaries, robberies, weapons violations, and carjackings were all rising in Madison. Residents were showing concern on social media, but didn't know what to do about it. I believe in less talk and more action. In late November 2019, MPD hosted a 3-hour event called Home Safety Night. The evening included a Good Neighbor Project presentation with co-founder Wendy Reichel. Wendy partnered with a Madison police officer in 2017 to build the Good Neighbor Project. The Good Neighbor Project is a modern, more friendly. It's all about building neighborhood relationships and working together with your police department. This looked like something I could really do. At the end of the night, 3 hours later, on the way home, I said to myself, I'm going to start a Good Neighbor Project. Told neighbors about good things other neighbors are doing, and congratulated students with academic awards, and much, much more. Within 2 weeks, the Buckeye Grove Good Neighbor Project was born using our own Facebook group, and here we are almost 3 years later with over 1,000 members. People wanted to get involved, but sometimes it just takes somebody to steer the ship. In a recent national survey, only 25% of the residents feel very connected to neighbors, and 50% admit they don't make the time to get to know their neighbors. My objective this morning is to encourage you and others to purposefully connect, communicate, and come together with neighbors and law enforcement. Safe, caring neighborhoods start with good neighbors. Connect by stepping out of your comfort zone, saying hi and introducing yourself to everybody in a hallway. First of all, whether you're in a condo, an apartment, or a house, get to know your neighbors, especially those living closest to you. They are your first responders. In the Good Neighbor Project world, we use the 9-house model. You are in the center. Get to know those neighbors around you. If you live in an apartment or condo, you can adjust the configuration. The idea is to get to know those neighbors closest to you well enough to exchange contact information like phone numbers and email addresses. That contact information can be used in case there's an emergency or you need to help. When you take time to get to know your neighbors and neighborhood police officers, you'll feel a stronger sense of community. Also, by connecting with those other 8 neighbors, you multiply the eyes and ears of your immediate area by 8. We never know when something serious could happen in your neighborhood, so it's good to have these connections in case something does. Okay, here are a couple examples of how important and useful it is to stay connected and communicate with your neighbors. In the late afternoon of June 13th, severe thunderstorms rolled through southern Wisconsin. In parts of Madison, we had straight line winds of over 80 miles an hour. Widespread tree damage caved in roofs, took down power lines, and snapped power poles. That caused power outages for up to 4 days. I have 2 close by neighbors who have generators. They simply called, texted, or even stopped in to neighbors and offered them to let them plug their refrigerators or any medical equipment into their generators. That was a classic 9-house model evening. Also this summer, in a normally very quiet neighborhood near me, there was an incident that required the SWAT team to respond. Of course, people were concerned. Social media rumors were flying high as usual while the event was happening. There wasn't a lot of information out there, so the next day I was able to book a Madison Police Department crisis negotiator who I know for a Good Neighbor Project meeting, which you see pictured here. The officer explained what happens at a scene when SWAT and crisis negotiators appear. The intention is to make people less scared when or if SWAT appears in our neighborhoods. The information the crisis negotiator offered gave us an idea of what happens and why it happens. The more we learn about police officers and events, the less we fear. By connecting with these neighbors, if you're in a home with a garage, one of your neighbors can be a garage buddy. If you happen to leave your garage door open, a garage buddy can call you or send a text to you to let you know your garage is open. A garage buddy could even be a friend or relative who lives many blocks away, but they drive past your home on a regular basis to let you know your garage door is open. I know of quite a few instances where Madison police officers were garage buddies. They actually noticed garage doors open late at night, made contact with the residents, and then let them know that their doors were open. And there are other ways to communicate. Start an email list or a private social media group on Facebook or Nextdoor. Use your community board in your building or at the nearest library to highlight what you're planning. If there are neighborhood associations or community newspapers around you, ask them to write an article in their newsletters. While you're at it, be sure to always contact your local police department and invite a community officer or beat patrol officer to all of these events. Be sure to let them know how much you appreciate them because they appreciate you. Those police officers who live and work in your neighborhood truly do care about your safety and well-being. My partners and I have been to countless activities with police and residents together. Police love interacting with communities, so always initiate a coffee with a cop at a coffee shop, your community building, a library, or your local police department community room. Participate in the annual National Night Out in your community. Activities are countless to form a connection and come together. And always remember to invite your police officers and never forget, safe caring neighborhoods begin with good neighbors. Thank you. And now to Wendy, and I appreciate your patience with all the little glitches.
Thank you, everybody. Kim had a glitch over in his neighborhood with Charter Spectrum cutting a wire last night, so that's probably why he was going in and out. So we apologize for that. To wind things up as promised, I'm now going to share with you some fun ideas for meeting together and getting to know some of the police officers and neighbors in your community. Except that we have gremlins. My next button is not working. This is great. Well, I might not be able to share anything either. I don't know what's going on. This locked up when we were doing the other thing. Try it one more time. Ta-da! The first one is the most simple of all. Introduce yourself. If you see an officer out and about doing foot patrol or at a community event, don't be afraid to go up to them and introduce yourself. Most officers love chatting with the community members they serve every day. Police departments across the state have events throughout the year that give you opportunities to participate and get to know them better. Some events are for charity. For example, many have fundraisers for their K-9 unit. Other common police events include Cops on a Rooftop, where officers help raise money for the Special Olympics. Or there's Cops and Bobbers, which is a popular event geared for young kids. They can spend the day fishing with a police officer, and everything they need is provided. You might also see friendly face-offs between police and fire departments. Maybe it's softball or a hockey game. And then proceeds from that event usually support a local charity. Be on the lookout for events like these that you can take part in. In fact, tomorrow, Madison Police and Madison Fire face off for charity in a Battle of the Badges soccer match at Reese Stevens Field at 4 p.m. A once-a-year event that's very popular with police departments across the country is National Night Out. This event was designed in the 1980s to bring police and the community together for a night of fun. Because it's a registered national event, technically you're supposed to hold it on the first Tuesday of each August. So that's why you'll sometimes see police departments calling their events Community Night Out or Family Fun Night, because they've chosen to celebrate on a different date. All of them are a little bit different, but here in Dane County, a lot of them serve free food, and some have music or even a raffle, plus plenty of activities for kids like slides or bouncy houses. Police and other first responders show off their squad cars, ambulances, fire trucks, and other equipment. And you may even be able to see a K-9 demonstration or watch a helicopter take off or land. There are also lots of giveaways as nonprofits and community groups like Crime Stoppers set up information booths. National Night Out events are fun for the whole family and a great way to spend some time with your neighbors and the police officers and other first responders who serve you. Here's another easy one. Get to know the new officers in your community. The photo on the left shows a new officer introduced to the village of DeForest last week. She just finished her field training and is now out on solo patrol. If you know of an officer in your community, a new officer, Seek them out and welcome them. Let them in on the best place they can get some good coffee. Or if they're not originally from the area, let them know about some special events or activities in your city or town, or even neighborhood that they shouldn't miss. Then if you ever have a problem in your neighborhood in the future, you'll already personally know an officer you can reach out to. On the right, you're looking at half the current recruit class for the Madison Police Department, posing with neighbors after a walk with a cop recruit event we had this summer. An officer friend in the training department reached out to me and Kim and asked if we'd be willing to get some neighbors together to get to know some of these new officers in training. On a nice summer afternoon, half the class went to the west side and half to the east side, where we met them at city parks. Then neighbors and recruits walked the paths together, getting to know each other. We got to find out why they wanted to become a Madison police officer and what they hope to do while working with the department. And we got to share stories about our neighborhoods and our city. Another very common police community event you can participate in is Coffee with a Cop. Many police departments have these events at least once or twice a year, or maybe even more regularly. Traditionally, they're very informal, and you just show up to a scheduled event at a coffee shop and chat with officers who mingle with residents. You can ask questions or share your concerns, or just have a nice conversation about anything you want. There are also more organized events. The Madison Police East and North Districts each have a monthly Coffee with a Cop event at a community center or the library or their district stations. There's usually time set aside for residents to ask questions or share concerns, but then they often have a guest speaker or presenter. Maybe it's someone from the police department, like a detective, or an officer from a specific unit, like the mental health or gang unit. Or it might be someone from the district attorney's office or a nonprofit leader whose work dovetails with the police department. On the west side of Madison, there's a hybrid Coffee with a Cop that's been going on since 2016. It was started by a coffee shop owner who came to the US from a country where police and residents don't get along. He wanted his shop to be a place where those relationships could be built and nurtured. I've been coordinating that one for the last several years, and we sometimes have a topic or speaker, but mostly neighbors just gather together for coffee each week, and then police officers show up as they are able to based on calls for service. I would like to encourage you to come up with your own Coffee with a Cop event. Invite officers to your neighborhood or your living facility or your apartment complex. On the right, back in February, someone from our weekly group set up a special meeting at a senior living facility in Madison. Their residents kindly welcomed us with a huge spread of food and refreshments. And then an MPD captain invited some of the neighborhood and patrol officers to come and introduce themselves. They talked about what they do for the department and for that neighborhood. And then everyone had a chance to ask their questions. During COVID, the coffee shop where we meet was closed down just like all businesses, so we had to improvise. We started meeting in city parks during the warmer months of 2020 and 2021. Officers enjoyed getting out of their districts and squad cars for a bit to enjoy some friendly conversation and fresh air. And then passersby or people using the park could drop in and join us if they wished. During the colder months, we met on Zoom. On the bottom is a photo of one of our special nights Coffee with a Cop events. This idea was hatched by an MPD captain a few years ago. Night shift officers don't have a lot of opportunities to meet with the public beyond the people they see on police calls. I mean, most people are sleeping, so there aren't kids playing games in schoolyards or parks, and most businesses, restaurants, and community gathering places are closed. He wanted those officers to see some friendly faces, so we happily volunteered to do a night version of Coffee with a Cop for them. All you need is a place to host the event and some neighbors willing to stay up past their bedtimes. When we did the first one, we started at 11 p.m., which was a little too late. I don't recommend that. Now we start them at 9 p.m. instead, and then we're still able to straddle 3 different shifts of officers who have an opportunity to stop in and visit us and enjoy coffee or tea or any treats that we may bring them. Last summer, an MPD captain mentioned that he wished there was some kind of Coffee with a Cop type event that could be held in the evening so that people who work or volunteer during the day would be able to participate. That's when we came up with the idea for an alcohol-free happy hour event that we called a 5-0 after 5. We reserved a space at a local restaurant and got a bargain on hors d'oeuvres and soda. And then we asked a local bakery if they'd be willing to donate a cake. Then we advertised to neighbors by word of mouth and on Nextdoor. Plus, we made some flyers and posted them at local businesses and the library. Police officers and detectives were invited to attend, including the police chief and the sheriff. And about a dozen were able to drop in and take turns introducing themselves to us. And then neighbors and officers got to enjoy food and refreshments and great conversation together at their tables. You don't need to have an event like this at a restaurant. If you have an available community space, you could have neighbors pitch in to provide their refreshments and snacks. You could make it as simple or as elaborate as you want. Another easy community building activity you can try with police officers is walk with a cop. I made this one up last summer. I asked our neighborhood patrol officer if he would be willing and able to do some foot patrol while walking along with some neighbors. We did 2 of these last summer in 2 different West Side neighborhoods. Bonnie and I live in the same neighborhood, so we tried the inaugural event in our neighborhood first. The officer picked a Sunday morning because that's when there are fewer police calls, but thankfully also a lot of people out and about enjoying their weekend. The officer parked his squad on Bonnie Street, and then we just casually walked around the neighborhood looking for people who were outside. Bonnie and I introduced ourselves to them as fellow neighbors, and then the officer introduced himself and asked if people had any questions or concerns. We had a lot of friendly conversations with neighbors who were at the park or hosting a garage sale or who were doing yard work. And oh my goodness, we met so many dogs. When we were talking to one lady who was harvesting some of her vegetables in her front yard, she kindly asked us if we wanted some freshly dug garlic. The 3 of us eagerly answered yes, and the next thing I knew, we were all holding a head of fresh garlic, scapes and all. But then I was wondering, what on earth are we going to do with this? Because we still had 80 minutes of walking time left. But before I could even say anything, the officer had gotten out his utility knife and had cut off the scapes. Then he placed the heads of garlic in an evidence bag that he pulled out, and he carried it for us for the rest of the walk in his pocket. Another great way to spend some time learning with neighbors while getting to know your police officers better is by taking a tour together. See if your police officers would be willing to show you around their police station, where you can get a better look at all the equipment they use, and where they process evidence, and where detectives work on cases. Some even have little museum-like displays of the history of their department, or how their squads or uniforms, or even how your city or town has changed throughout the years. I've also taken groups on a tour of the Dane County 911 Center, where you get to see 911 dispatchers and call takers in action. Our police officers can't do their jobs without them. In March, Kim put together a tour of the Juvenile Detention Center, so his Good Neighbor Project neighbors could learn more about what happens to kids when they're taken into custody in Dane County. And our Dane County sheriffs are happy to take people on tours of the jail and public safety building. I arranged a tour with Sheriff Mahoney a few years ago, and our group crowded into a solitary confinement cell, and we walked around in an occupied dormitory-style jail cell. We also watched people arrested people get processed, and then even talked to some of the deputies and inmates. Bonnie already mentioned this one, but I'll add on. Another way to learn so much more about your police department is to take a civilian ride along. It's fascinating to get that firsthand look at what officers see and do every day. And you'll also get a glimpse of what's really going on in your community. Why are people calling 911? I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, so it took me 2 years just to even work up the courage to ask an officer for a ride along. But if you're hesitant like me, just know that officers are very good about telling you when you can come with them and when you should stay behind. Speaking of which, if you have some mobility issues, you can still experience a lot on a ride along without ever leaving the squad car. You can usually talk to an officer about a ride along or see if your department has a sign up on their website. Kim mentioned this a little bit with the Good Neighbor Project, but if you already have events and activities in your neighborhood, please don't forget to include your police officers. The ladies in the photo in the upper left play dominoes at their senior center in West Dallas, and recently they asked some police officers to join them. In the upper middle, some young ladies in a West Side Madison neighborhood decided to raise money for the Madison Canine Unit with a lemonade stand and a bake sale, and they invited a canine officer to stop by. They really didn't think anyone would show up, but not only did a canine officer pull up in her squad and buy lemonade and cookies, but she brought along her canine partner, and she gave a special demonstration in the girls' front yard for them and their neighbors. The officers in the bottom left photo accepted the invitation to a neighborhood's annual picnic and got to meet a lot of the residents. If you're having an event and you want a crowd pleaser, consider asking a canine team to attend, or mounted patrol officers if your community has them. And then if you decide you want police to be the presenters at an event, don't be afraid to ask them to tailor their presentation for your audience. What do your neighbors want to learn more about? My neighborhood's Good Neighbor Project group held very popular monthly meetings until COVID. And one time I asked an officer if he'd be willing to give our attendees a special burglary crime presentation. I wanted neighbors to learn exactly what they should do if they discover a burglar in their house, or if they come home and find out someone has already been inside. And then what do officers do when they respond? 2 officers were very excited to participate. They even acted out a crime scene 911 call in the police response. And as you can see from the smiles in the photo in the upper left, they had a lot of fun doing it. 4 years later, neighbors still talk about how enjoyable that presentation was, and also full of good information. And I don't want to give away all the details on this one because we still use it, just now through Crime Stoppers. But a few years ago, I asked a different Madison officer if he'd be willing to do a presentation on being more aware of your surroundings, to help protect people from being victims of crimes, and to also make them better witnesses, or to react smarter if, God forbid, they were ever in an active shooter situation. So we advertised that meeting's topic as something completely different. And we did indeed deliver that information. But what the audience didn't know is that we were also testing their situational awareness throughout that presentation. Afterward, there were a lot of laughs when we quizzed them on what happened during the meeting and what they thought they had seen and heard. Last but not least is the simple act of appreciation. If you like the job your police officers are doing in your community, take a little time to reach out and say thank you. You can send a simple thank you card or maybe deliver treats to a police station. Officers will eat just about anything, and they don't even mind the cliche box of donuts. Another fun activity is chalking the sidewalks at a station with appreciation messages, although I recommend you let someone know you're coming first before doing that one. Last summer, I joined some neighbors and we wrote chalk messages at the West District Station in Madison. And then some of the ladies got the idea to make a giant heart that took up both lanes of the driveway. So officers would see that when they pulled in and out of the station. We heard that heart lasted almost a week, even with a rainstorm. There are a couple of national law enforcement related days each year when people are encouraged to show their appreciation. A few weeks ago, it was National Thank a Police Officer Day, which is every 3rd Saturday in September. The next one you could plan for is coming up on January 9th when it's National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. But of course, any day is a great day to show thanks and appreciation to the officers who help keep our community safe. Before we answer any questions, I want to leave you with a couple of resources. If you live in the Madison area, Mike mentioned this, you can stay up to date on police and safety events in Dane County and learn more about crime incidents and trends by checking out the Madison Area Safety Connection website. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. And then Kim mentioned his Good Neighbor Project, and you don't have to live on the east or north side of Madison to join if you want to. You can find that Facebook group under the Buckeye Grove Good Neighbor Project. Then if you live outside of the Madison area, look for your Crime Stoppers organization. They're all separate nonprofits under the umbrella of the national organization, and they're all a little bit different. Most of them focus on a Facebook presence because it's such a quick way to share information that needs to get out as soon as possible. Some share only crime information, but others are also very good about keeping people informed about local safety events or fundraisers. You can find Madison Area Crime Stoppers on Facebook, but we also have a website, and on the tab that says Unsolved Crimes, it shows the last 6 Facebook posts about crime incidents. You can click through and be taken to a public Facebook post without even being a Facebook user. We're also on Twitter, and then if you're a Wisconsin State Journal subscriber, you can find Crime Stoppers Crime of the Week in the newspaper every Tuesday. If there's no notable crime that week, we'll share crime prevention tips or an upcoming event in that space. Historically, our nonprofit has been focused mostly on solving crimes, but we're now shifting to add more crime prevention information and even offer community safety events, as Bonnie mentioned. We had our first home safety night in partnership with the Monona Police Department early this year, and we will be giving presentations soon in Middleton and Sun Prairie. Finally, if after today you want to reach out to any of us, you can use this email address. It's thesafetyscoop@gmail.com. We used this for a project a couple of years ago, but it still works and you can contact any one of us. So we are happy to take any questions if anyone has any. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and for putting up with all the technical glitches.
Thank you, Wendy, Kim, and Bonnie. Really appreciate the terrific presentation. You know, even though it was interrupted with all this technical stuff occasionally. So thank you so much. if you have questions, everyone, please put it in the Q&A box or the chat, and I'm watching those. I'll present them right away. I have one question here, Bonnie, I put to you right away. You know, it's easy to get people who are in favor of good policing to get out there and, you know, interact with police officers, right? But how do you bring those who are critical into the process, right? Skeptical, whatever. How do you reach people who are negative, you know? How do you do that?
Sometimes it's hard to get people who are very critical of police officers to these community events because sometimes they don't really want to challenge their preconceived notions and actually spend time with a police officer.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of that dialogue happens on Nextdoor or different Facebook comments. And then sometimes I will initiate like a little conversation in the chat or a personal message or something like that. I have had the opportunity to sit down across the table from several people that are pretty hostile to police officers, and at least, you know, we're able to get to know each other and our stories a little bit more, and they can see that that I understand their concerns, and in fact, a lot of times just enlighten some of their preconceived notions and shed some light on the reality of policing in our city. So it's fun. I really enjoy that aspect of what we do.
Yeah, that's really good. You know, I used to follow Nextdoor quite a bit, and you know, it can be a really poisonous environment at times because some of the people are just spouting nonsense. I mean, they're really venting more than anything else, and it's not directed toward finding solutions. So, you know, just that one is a tough one to go to. But you know, I always enjoy whenever I come to coffee with a cop. I enjoy talking with especially neighbors, and if a cop can jump in, that's great. You know, I find out, you know, what those guys were doing, hanging out there on Hammersley Road, you know, just watching it. They were doing a speed check, right? You know, so that's easy to get information there. Yeah. Let's see, we do have a question in the Q&A box here. It says, I wasn't aware of the community support that our police department offers. How can we make people more aware? Well, I guess, you know, go to Safety Connection, right? safetyconnection.net, and you would be following, you know, what your group is doing anyway. Do you think the police department has somewhat of a PR problem? I mean, do they not communicate enough about the good things they're doing? Do you only hear about the burglaries and not the crime solved?
Bonnie, I'm letting you have this one.
I do think they have a PR problem, and I think part of it is that they are all busy. You know, at least the sworn officers are busy solving crimes and dealing with the calls as they come in. But MPD did just hire a police community relations specialist, and that person's job will be to have more of these events and I think get the word out to the broader community. So hopefully there will be some changes with that. And hopefully as just word spreads about what we're doing between Crime Stoppers and the Good Neighbor Project and Coffee with a Cop and these different initiatives, hopefully word will spread and people will begin to get more involved and understand that our police officers are supported by a large number of community members.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just to add on to that, I never knew we could even do any of all this stuff the whole list that I went through. That's why last summer I just started making stuff up because, hey, you never know. You ask an officer if they want to try, they are always willing to try new things if they have time and they're not understaffed. They want to work with the community and try new things and help educate. And so if you have a creative idea, don't be afraid to approach your police department. Just ask. The worst that can happen is they say no, or we don't have enough time.
True. Well, as you can see, I mean, if officers are going to be out walking and talking with the public, right, it takes time. That's time away from investigating cases, watching for speeders, whatever. As police departments are directed more toward immediate response rather than proactive response, isn't that kind of aggravating the community policing model? Doesn't that thwart efforts, you know, to bring the community more into the picture?
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know, Bonnie, if you want to add to this, but I think that's what leads to burnout too, because that's why our Night's Coffee with a Cop is so popular. When we had the very first one, Chief Koval was still the chief, and he kept warning us, just be careful. They're a little crusty. They're not used to dealing with the public. And they were delightful people, but they just see people in duress all night long. They don't get to, so that they're sort of an example of what happens when you don't get out in the community and get to see smiling faces and get some input, critical or not. And so that was sort of a little experiment that we went through by talking to the night shift officers, but they're just delighted to see people at that hour that aren't on a drunk driving call or in the middle of a domestic or something.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I will add a little something if we have time. And that is 21st century policing really does call for an increase in police community partnership and that proactive policing that, officers are able to get out into neighborhoods and interact, and especially in those neighborhoods that might be more challenged in their understanding and acceptance of police. So part of the problem is budget cuts. And even though the Common Council likes to act like they would like the police officers to be more engaged in community activities, it really is not possible because the top priority, of course, needs to be responding to 911 calls. And if that's all they get time to do in a day, then there is not that time. It should be about 50% ideally of proactive problem-solving policing. And I don't believe they're anywhere near that right now because they're very understaffed and underfunded. So.
And that's not just Madison. We get to talk to lots of community officers with our work with Crime Stoppers. They're liaisons to our board, and they're pulled in a million different directions because sometimes they're the lone officer that is working for the department that has the free time to go out and about, but they're constantly being asked to fill in patrol shifts. A lot of the agencies around Madison and in other parts of the state, everywhere I went to look for extra pictures, they were we're hiring, and signing bonuses and everything. So it's a problem all over the country with that.
And I'd like to piggyback on that before my video goes out again. I see it's flittering. These neighborhoods want to see a police officer in their neighborhoods. They want to be able to interact with them. And as when Bonnie mentioned, because of budget cuts, the police departments have had to pull officers out of these neighborhoods where they not just want to see proactive policing, but they need it. The officers want to do it, but once you pull them out, well, so much for proactive policing, then you end up with just reactive policing. And the youngsters, all they see is when something bad happens, the police show up. They don't see the police show up on a bright sunny day like today, and they don't have the time or the resources to mingle with the neighborhood. So that's a big problem. And trust us, they enjoy going into those neighborhoods and making those relationships. But if they're not able, they can't. Mm-hmm. And again, I apologize. I'm watching my video flicker, so I don't know.
You're doing okay, Kim. You're doing okay.
All right.
We can see you here. So if an individual on this call were interested in some sort of activity, one of the activities you mentioned, what would you recommend as a first step? What is the easiest thing in the world other than saying hi, waving to your neighborhood officer they go through? What else can they do that doesn't take a whole lot of effort? Hosting a huge meeting is a lot different from, some other things. What would you suggest as a first meeting?
Well, I mentioned that people want to get involved, but they just need somebody to steer the ship. So I decided to steer the ship. Some people will follow then, and some people will join. So somebody, just take the initiative, make a plan, and then, plan your work your plan, and get people involved. Somebody has to start it, and why can't it be you?
I like the easy stuff like coffee with a cop or showing appreciation. Usually if you show appreciation at a police department, they'll drag officers out of the back who will gladly come and take your thank you card or your food, and you'll have a nice little chat with them. And it's more of a organic experience where one thing leads, a lot of my stories were a captain said this or we meet a lot of the captains and they start throwing out their ideas and we're like, okay, we'll try that. We're willing to. So just start small and it'll happen on its own, I think.
Okay, terrific. Any other questions? We're down to the last minute here. Anyone else? All right, well, seeing none, then I'll just take a second to thank you again, Wendy, Kim, Bonnie, Deputy Leslie. Thank you for joining us today and hosting the first session. Really appreciate it.